Good evening, my friend, and welcome. Tonight, leave the noise of the day behind as we wander into another quiet chapter of the past. There is no rush here, no need to stay wide awake. Just settle into a comfortable place, let your breathing slow, and allow the story to unfold at its own gentle pace. If these peaceful journeys help you relax or drift off to sleep, you're always welcome to return for another adventure. Your support, simply by being here, means more than you know. Now, imagine the world growing quieter with every passing moment. The lights fade, the air feels calm, and the worries of today slowly slip away. As the night wraps gently around us, we'll open the door to another forgotten place, where history whispers instead of shouts, and every step brings us a... And before we begin, if these quiet journeys bring you a little peace at the end of your day, I'd be truly grateful if you chose to support this channel by subscribing. A gentle tap on the like button helps these stories reach others who may need a peaceful night as well. I'd also love to hear from you. Instead of simply saying hello, tell me one small thing. What part of the world are you listening from tonight? It's always comforting to know that although we're miles apart, we're sharing this quiet moment together. Now, make yourself comfortable, let the outside world slowly fade away, and let's begin tonight's story. More than 250 years ago, long before electric lights and busy highways, the nights in colonial America were incredibly quiet. Small wooden houses stood close together, and once the sun disappeared, darkness covered the villages. In one small town, there lived an elderly night watchman named Thomas. Every evening, just before sunset, he picked up a wooden lantern, a long walking stick, and a small brass bell. While everyone else prepared for sleep, Thomas began his lonely journey through the empty streets. His job was simple but important. He walked slowly from one end of the village to the other, making sure no fires had started and that every home was safe. In those days, a single spark from a fireplace could destroy an entire town built from dry wood. As he walked, Thomas gently rang his bell every hour and called into the quiet night, "All is well." Families sleeping inside their homes often smiled when they heard his familiar voice. Children felt safe knowing the watchman was nearby. Travelers arriving late followed the sound of his bell to find the center of the village. Winter nights were especially difficult. Snow covered the roads, icy winds blew through the trees, and Thomas's lantern became the only warm light visible for miles. Yet he never missed a single night. Sometimes he stopped to help a lost traveler. Other times, he quietly knocked on a neighbor's door after noticing smoke escaping from a chimney. More than once, his careful eyes prevented dangerous fires before they could spread. The work was not glamorous. Few people remembered his name, and he earned very little money. But the peaceful sleep of an entire community depended on his quiet dedication. As the years passed, larger towns hired organized police forces, brighter street lamps appeared, and the old tradition of the village watchman slowly disappeared. Thomas eventually retired, leaving behind only memories and stories shared by the oldest villagers. Today, it is easy to forget that centuries ago, the safety of a town often depended on one person carrying nothing more than a lantern, a bell, and a strong sense of responsibility. Perhaps somewhere in the silence of an old American village, if you listen carefully enough, you can almost imagine the soft footsteps of a lonely watchman and hear the gentle words drifting through the night. All is well. Tonight, let us travel back more than 200 years to a quiet American town where the sun set without streetlights, and every evening was welcomed by the soft glow of candlelight. In those days, candles were not decorations. They were a necessity. Without them, families could not cook after dark, read a book, repair clothing, or safely move around their homes. In one small colonial town lived a humble candle maker named Samuel. Every morning before sunrise, Samuel began his work. He slowly melted animal fat over a warm fire, carefully prepared cotton wicks, and dipped them into the hot wax again and again. Each layer had to cool before the next was added. A single candle could take hours to complete. His workshop was simple. Wooden shelves held rows of unfinished candles. The smell of warm wax filled the air, while birds sang outside the small windows. The work demanded patience. If the wax became too hot, the candles would crack. If the wick was not perfectly centered, the flame would burn unevenly. As autumn turned into winter, Samuel worked even longer hours. The nights grew colder and much longer. Every family wanted enough candles to last until spring.
Children often visited his workshop, fascinated as each thin candle slowly became thicker with every careful dip. Samuel smiled, but reminded them never to play with fire. In a town built almost entirely from wood, one careless flame could destroy everything. When evening arrived, families placed Samuel's candles on wooden tables, beside fireplaces, or near their windows. Their gentle light illuminated family dinners, quiet conversations, handwritten letters, and bedtime prayers. Doctors relied on candles while treating patients at night. Travelers carried them along dark roads. Teachers used them while preparing lessons for the next morning. Although most people never thought much about the candle maker, nearly every home depended on his quiet work. Years later, oil lamps became more common. Eventually, electricity transformed American towns forever. Bright bulbs replaced candles, and darkness no longer arrived quite the same way.
Samuel's workshop disappeared with time, leaving behind only memories of a slower world where every evening depended on the steady hands of one craftsman. As you relax tonight, imagine the peaceful glow of a single handmade candle, gently lighting a quiet colonial home, while the rest of the world sleeps in silence. The Miller Who Never Slept. Life at an Early American Grist Mill. Tonight, we journey back more than 200 years to a small American village where the loudest sound was not traffic, but the steady turning of a wooden water wheel. Near the edge of the town stood a simple grist mill beside a flowing creek. The mill was the heart of the community, and the man who operated it was known simply as the Miller. Before dawn, while the village was still asleep, the miller stepped outside into the cool morning air. Mist floated above the water, birds had only just begun to sing, and the large wooden wheel slowly started to turn with the current.
Farmers arrived one by one with heavy sacks of wheat, corn, and rye loaded onto horse-drawn wagons. They greeted one another quietly while waiting for their grain to be ground into flour. Inside the mill, huge wooden gears creaked gently as they transferred the power of the flowing water to massive stone grinding wheels. The steady rhythm echoed through the building all day long. The work demanded patience and precision. If the stones were too close together, the flour would burn. If they were too far apart, the grain would remain coarse and unusable. While waiting, neighbors exchanged stories, discussed the weather, and shared news from nearby towns. The mill was not only a workplace, it was where a small community stayed connected. During the autumn harvest, the mill worked from sunrise until long after sunset. The miller often lit several candles so he could continue working into the night, knowing every family depended on fresh flour before winter arrived. His clothes were always covered in a fine layer of white flour. By evening, his hands were tired, his back ached, and the sound of turning stones lingered in his ears. Yet every loaf of bread baked in the village began with the quiet work inside this humble mill. As the years passed, larger steam-powered mills appeared. Railroads carried flour across great distances, and many small water mills slowly closed their doors. Nature reclaimed the old buildings.
Wooden wheels stopped turning, roofs weathered away, and vines climbed over the stone walls. Today, if you walk beside an old American creek, you might still discover the moss-covered remains of one of these forgotten mills. The rushing water continues its journey, just as it did centuries ago, whispering the story of a hard-working miller whose quiet labor helped feed an entire community. And as the gentle sound of the flowing creek fills the night, imagine yourself sitting nearby, listening to the slow turning of the old water wheel as sleep gradually finds you.
Tonight, let us quietly step into a small colonial village where the steady ringing of a hammer echoed through the crisp morning air. Near the center of town stood a modest blacksmith shop. Warm orange light glowed from its open doorway long before most families had awakened. Inside worked a skilled blacksmith named William. Each day began by feeding charcoal into a stone forge until the fire burned bright enough to soften iron. Soon, the rhythmic sound of hammer striking metal filled the peaceful village. William shaped horseshoes for hard-working farm horses, repaired broken wagon wheels, crafted sturdy nails for new homes, and forged simple farming tools that helped families plant and harvest their crops. Every piece required patience. Iron had to be heated until it glowed bright orange before it could be shaped. Too cool, and it would crack. Too hot, and it became weak.
Villagers often gathered outside the workshop while waiting for repairs. They exchanged stories, shared local news, and watched sparks gently rise into the morning sky. Children loved watching the glowing metal change shape beneath the heavy hammer, although they always stayed a safe distance from the intense heat. During busy harvest seasons, William sometimes worked from sunrise until late evening. Without his quiet craftsmanship, many daily tasks across the village would simply come to a stop. Years later, large factories began producing tools much faster than one village blacksmith ever could. Slowly, the sound of hammer on anvil faded from many American towns. Today, restored blacksmith shops occasionally welcome visitors, offering a glimpse into a slower world where nearly every useful object was shaped by hand. As the gentle ringing of the hammer fades into the distance, imagine the warm glow of the old forge slowly dimming beneath the quiet evening sky.
Tonight, we continue our peaceful journey into colonial America, where learning often took place inside a single wooden room. At the edge of a quiet village stood a simple one-room schoolhouse surrounded by tall oak trees. Each morning, children of every age walked along narrow dirt paths, carrying small books and writing slates. Waiting for them was their teacher, Mrs. Eleanor. Unlike modern classrooms, every student learned together. The youngest practiced the alphabet, while older students studied arithmetic, geography, and passages from well-loved books. A small iron stove warmed the room during the long winter months, while sunlight streamed through tall windows during spring and summer. Lessons moved slowly and calmly. Students took turns reading aloud, carefully writing with chalk, and quietly helping younger classmates understand their work. Outside, birds sang in nearby trees, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh grass through the open windows. Education was considered a great privilege. Many children also worked on family farms, so attending school every day was not always possible. Mrs. Eleanor patiently encouraged every child to learn something new, believing that knowledge would help build a brighter future for the growing colonies. As decades passed, larger schools were built, textbooks became more common, and education slowly changed. Yet the quiet spirit of those tiny schoolhouses remains part of American history. As evening settles over the village once more, imagine the empty classroom resting peacefully beneath the fading light, waiting for another gentle morning to begin.
Tonight, Our peaceful journey through colonial America continues beneath a sky filled with quiet stars. As darkness gently covered the small village, most families had already extinguished their candles and settled into bed. Only the soft chirping of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl broke the silence. But while the village slept, one person remained awake. His name was Dr. Samuel, the village doctor. Whenever someone became ill or injured, no matter how late the hour, a quiet knock upon his wooden door would bring him gently from his rest. Without complaint, he would light a small oil lantern, gather his leather medical bag, and saddle his faithful horse. The narrow dirt roads were often dark and uneven, winding through forests, open fields, and quiet streams. Guided only by the warm glow of his lantern and the familiar path beneath his horse's hooves, Dr. Samuel traveled patiently through the peaceful night. Most homes were simple wooden cottages. When he arrived, worried families welcomed him with grateful smiles and whispered voices so as not to disturb sleeping children. His medical tools were few by today's standards.
He carried simple herbal remedies, clean cloth bandages, glass bottles filled with carefully prepared medicines, and years of practical experience passed from older physicians. Sometimes he treated a child with a fever. Sometimes he carefully bandaged a farmer's injured hand after a long day's work. At other times, he simply stayed beside a patient, offering calm reassurance while nature slowly helped the body recover. There were no hospitals nearby and no telephones to call for help. The village doctor became a trusted friend to every family, always ready to serve whenever he was needed. As dawn slowly painted the eastern sky with gentle shades of gold, Dr. Samuel would quietly return home. His horse walked slowly along the peaceful road, while birds welcomed the coming morning with soft songs. Though tired from a long night's journey, he felt grateful that he had been able to help his neighbors once again. Now, as the first sunlight reaches the quiet village, we leave Dr. Samuel to enjoy a well-earned rest, while another calm colonial morning gently begins.
The farmer who welcomed every season. Our peaceful journey now leads us beyond the village and into the wide open fields of colonial America, where each season brought new work and quiet rewards. There lived a kind farmer named Benjamin, whose small wooden farmhouse stood beside rolling fields, shaded by tall maple trees. He believed that every season offered its own special gift. In spring, he carefully prepared the soil with the help of his sturdy horse and simple wooden plow. Tiny seeds were placed gently into the earth, while warm sunshine and soft rain slowly awakened new life. Summer arrived with long, bright days. Benjamin worked from sunrise until evening, watering young crops, repairing wooden fences, and watching golden fields sway gently in the breeze. Birds sang overhead, bees buzzed among colorful wildflowers, and children sometimes helped gather fresh vegetables from the family garden. When autumn finally arrived, the fields were ready for harvest. Neighbors worked together, filling wooden wagons with corn, pumpkins, wheat, and apples. After many days of hard work, families gathered to share simple meals, thankful for another successful season.
Winter brought a slower pace. Snow quietly covered the fields, and Benjamin spent peaceful evenings beside the warm fireplace, repairing tools, carving wooden handles, and telling gentle stories to his children. Although each season looked different, Benjamin welcomed them all with patience and gratitude. He understood that nature moved slowly, and every season had its own purpose. As the sun gently sets beyond the quiet fields, the farmhouse grows peaceful once again, reminding us that the steady rhythm of the seasons shaped the lives of countless colonial families for generations.
The colonial blacksmith who forged the village's future. Tonight,
our peaceful journey continues to the warm glow of the village blacksmith's workshop, where the steady rhythm of hammer and anvil echoed through colonial America. Near the center of the village stood a small wooden building with wide doors that remained open during the day. From inside came the gentle crackle of a coal fire and the soft ringing of iron being shaped by careful hands. The village blacksmith was a kind man named Mr. Thomas. Before sunrise each morning, he lit the forge and patiently waited for the fire to grow hot enough to soften iron. His workshop was filled with simple but sturdy tools: heavy hammers, strong tongs, iron chisels, and a well-worn anvil that had served him faithfully for many years. Farmers arrived carrying broken plows that needed repair before planting season. Carpenters brought worn-out nails and metal fittings for new barns and homes. Travelers stopped to have loose horseshoes replaced before continuing along dusty country roads. Every task required patience rather than speed. Mr. Thomas heated each piece of iron until it glowed a deep orange, then gently shaped it with steady, measured strikes. The sound of hammer against anvil became one of the familiar voices of the village, echoing softly from morning until late afternoon. Children often paused outside the workshop, watching tiny sparks dance through the air like glowing fireflies. They listened with curiosity as the blacksmith explained how raw iron could become useful tools through careful work and perseverance. Nothing was wasted. Old pieces of iron were often heated again, reshaped into new tools, hinges, cooking hooks, or sturdy wagon parts. In a time before large factories, nearly every family depended on the blacksmith's quiet skill. As evening approached, Mr. Thomas carefully swept the workshop floor, covered the glowing coals, and closed the heavy wooden doors. The final warmth of the forge slowly faded as the village settled into another peaceful night. Though his work was demanding, the strong tools he created helped farms flourish, homes stand firmly, and travelers journey safely across the growing colonies. Now, beneath a sky filled with gentle stars, the silent blacksmith's workshop rests peacefully, waiting for another calm morning to begin.
Tonight, our gentle journey through colonial America continues along quiet country roads, where an important messenger traveled from village to village, carrying news, hope, and friendly words. Long before telephones, emails, or instant messages, families stayed connected through handwritten letters. The person responsible for delivering those precious messages was the colonial postwriter. In one peaceful town lived a careful and dependable writer named William. Before the first light of dawn touched the hills, William prepared his faithful horse, fastened a leather mailbag to the saddle, and quietly began another day's journey. Inside the mailbag were neatly folded letters, official notices, small newspapers, and sometimes important documents that needed to reach distant villages. Each envelope represented someone's story. One letter carried loving words from a son serving in another colony. Another shared the joyful news of a new baby born into a growing family. Others contained business agreements, invitations, or friendly greetings between old neighbors. The roads were often long and uneven. Some paths crossed peaceful forests where birds welcomed the morning with cheerful songs, chanting cheerful songs. Others followed gentle rivers or climbed low, rolling hills covered with wildflowers. At times, William crossed small wooden bridges, listening to the quiet sound of flowing water beneath his horse's steady footsteps. Whenever he reached a village, people smiled warmly as they gathered near the small post office or the village store. Many had been waiting patiently for days, hoping a letter from a loved one had finally arrived. William carefully handed each letter to its owner, sharing a kind smile and a few friendly words before continuing on his journey. Although the work required long hours and many miles of travel, he understood that every letter carried comfort, encouragement, and connection between families separated by great distances. As the afternoon sunlight slowly softened into evening, William turned his horse toward home. His mailbag was now almost empty, but his heart was full, knowing he had helped bring people a little closer together. The quiet roads gradually disappeared into the golden light of sunset, while the first evening stars began to appear overhead. And so, another peaceful day came to an end in colonial America, where even the simple journey of delivering a letter helped strengthen the bonds of growing communities.
Tonight, our peaceful journey through colonial America brings us to a warm little bakery, where each morning began long before the sun rose above the quiet village. While most homes were still dark and silent, a soft glow already shone through the bakery's small windows. Inside worked a gentle baker named Martha. Every day she woke before dawn, tied on her simple linen apron, and quietly prepared the first batch of bread. She carefully measured fresh flour, cool well water, a pinch of salt, and a small piece of yeast, mixing them together in a large wooden bowl. With steady hands, Martha kneaded the dough again and again until it became smooth and soft. She placed the loaves near the warm brick oven, allowing the dough to rise slowly while the bakery filled with peaceful silence. Soon, the oven was hot enough to begin baking. One by one, the loaves were placed inside using a long wooden peel. As they baked, a wonderful aroma drifted through the village streets. The comforting smell of fresh bread gently floated past nearby homes, shops, and gardens, welcoming everyone to a new day.
Before long, villagers began arriving at the bakery. Some carried woven baskets to take home warm bread for breakfast. Others purchased small rolls, oatcakes, or sweet pastries prepared for special occasions. Children smiled as Martha handed them tiny rolls that were still warm from the oven. Neighbors greeted one another with friendly conversations while patiently waiting for their turn. The bakery became more than just a place to buy food. It became a gathering place where news was shared, friendships grew, and the quiet rhythm of village life unfolded each morning. Nothing went to waste. Any leftover bread was carefully shared with families in need or used in simple soups and hearty meals. Martha believed that every loaf should nourish both body and spirit. As the afternoon slowly faded into evening, the last customers returned home carrying baskets filled with fresh bread. Martha swept the wooden floor, cleaned her mixing bowls, and allowed the great brick oven to cool. The warm scent of freshly baked bread lingered in the air as the village settled peacefully beneath the golden colors of sunset. And so another gentle day came to a close in colonial America, where the simple gift of freshly baked bread brought comfort, kindness, and a sense of home to everyone who passed through the bakery door. Tonight, our peaceful journey through colonial America continues with the steady sound of wood being carefully shaped by skilled hands. At the edge of a quiet village stood a modest woodworking shop surrounded by tall pine and oak trees. There worked a patient carpenter named Jonathan. Before the morning mist had fully lifted, Jonathan unlocked the wide wooden doors of his workshop and greeted the day with quiet determination. His tools were simple but dependable. Wooden planes, hand saws, chisels, mallets, measuring sticks, and smooth carving knives rested neatly on sturdy workbenches, each one carefully maintained through years of faithful use. Fresh-cut timber arrived from nearby forests, where hard-working lumbermen had carefully selected strong oak,
of pine, maple, and cedar trees. Jonathan examined every piece of wood with great care, looking closely at the grain and making sure each beam was strong enough to support a family's future home. He believed that careful preparation was just as important as careful construction.
Every measurement was checked twice before a single cut was made. Each wooden joint was shaped to fit perfectly without rushing the process. There were no electric saws or power drills. Instead, every board was cut by hand, every hole was carved with patient effort, and every beam was lifted into place with the help of neighbors working together. Throughout the seasons, Jonathan built sturdy cottages, spacious barns, wooden fences, schoolhouse desks, simple chairs, sturdy tables, and strong doors that protected families from wind and winter snow. Children often watched with quiet curiosity as curls of fresh wood gently fell onto the workshop floor. The pleasant scent of pine and cedar filled the air, while birds sang softly from nearby branches. Jonathan sometimes paused to teach young apprentices how to safely hold a chisel, measure a board accurately, or smooth rough wood until it felt soft beneath their hands. He reminded them that a well-built home was created through patience, honesty, and careful craftsmanship. As the golden afternoon slowly faded toward evening, the day's work came to an end. Jonathan carefully cleaned each tool, stacked the remaining lumber neatly, and closed the heavy wooden doors of his workshop. Beyond the village, the newly finished home stood quietly beneath the fading sunlight, ready to shelter generations of families through every changing season.
As the first stars appeared above the peaceful countryside, the carpenter's workshop rested silently, waiting for another calm morning and another opportunity to build something lasting.
Tonight, our peaceful journey through colonial America continues beside the gentle turning of a village watermill, where flowing water quietly powered one of the community's most important places. At the edge of a clear stream stood a sturdy wooden mill with a large water wheel that turned steadily from sunrise until evening. Inside worked a kind and hard-working miller named Samuel. Before the first rays of sunlight reached the valley, Samuel opened the heavy wooden doors of the mill and listened to the peaceful sound of water flowing beneath the wheel. Every day began with the same calm routine, checking the gears, sweeping the wooden floor, and making sure the great millstones were clean and ready for another day's work. Farmers soon arrived with sturdy wagons filled with sacks of freshly harvested wheat, corn, rye, and oats. Their horses waited patiently outside, while neighbors greeted one another with warm smiles and friendly conversation. Samuel carefully weighed each sack before carrying the grain toward the large wooden hopper. From there, the grain slowly passed between two enormous circular stones. The upper stone turned steadily, while the lower one remained still, gently crushing the kernels into soft, fine flour. The work required patience and close attention. If the stones turned too quickly, the flour could become too warm. If they turned too slowly, the grain would not be ground evenly. Samuel adjusted the flow of water with simple wooden gates, allowing nature itself to power the mill at just the right pace. The gentle rumble of the turning stones echoed through the building as tiny clouds of flour floated softly in the sunlight streaming through small windows. The pleasant scent of fresh grain filled the air, mixing with the cool smell of flowing water and old timber. Children often watched with fascination as the great water wheel slowly revolved outside. Samuel enjoyed explaining how the moving water turned the wheel, how the wheel moved the gears, and how the gears powered the heavy millstones without the need for animals or human strength. After the flour was carefully sifted, it was poured into clean cloth sacks and tied securely with strong twine.
Bakers, families, and shopkeepers depended upon this fresh flour to bake warm bread, sweet pies, hearty biscuits, and nourishing porridge that filled homes with comforting aromas. Throughout every season, whether bright summer mornings or snowy winter afternoons, the watermill remained an essential part of village life. As long as the stream continued to flow, the wheel continued to turn, quietly serving every family who depended upon it. As evening settled across the peaceful countryside, Samuel swept away the day's remaining flour, brushed the millstones clean, and closed the wooden doors.
Outside, the water wheel continued to turn gently beneath the fading light, while the quiet stream carried its steady song into the coming night. Tonight, our peaceful journey through colonial America continues inside a quiet cooper's workshop where skilled hands carefully shaped wooden barrels that served nearly every home and farm in the village. Near the busy marketplace stood a modest timber workshop filled with the gentle scent of fresh oak and cedar. There worked an experienced cooper named Benjamin, whose carefully made barrels were known throughout the surrounding countryside. Before sunrise, Benjamin unlocked the workshop and arranged his trusted tools upon a sturdy wooden bench. Wooden mallets, curved draw knives, hand planes, measuring hoops, and small chisels rested neatly in their proper places, ready for another peaceful day of craftsmanship. Strong oak logs, chosen for their durability, had been cut into long wooden staves. Benjamin examined each piece carefully, ensuring the grain was straight and free from cracks. He believed that every sturdy barrel began with selecting the finest wood. One by one, the wooden staves were shaped until their edges fit together perfectly. Temporary iron hoops gently held the pieces upright while the barrel slowly took its familiar rounded form. To make the wood flexible, Benjamin carefully warmed the staves over a small fire. Gentle heat and a little moisture softened the timber just enough to allow it to bend without breaking. With steady hands and patient effort, he tightened the hoops until every stave fit snugly against its neighbors. There was no hurry. Every measurement was checked with care. Tonight, our peaceful journey through colonial America continues beside a quiet stream where one of the village's oldest and most essential crafts was practiced with patience and great care. A short walk beyond the busy homes and gardens stood a modest tannery owned by a thoughtful craftsman named William. The workshop was built near flowing water, which was needed throughout the careful process of preparing leather. Before sunrise, William opened the wooden gates and began his peaceful morning routine. He inspected his tools, cleaned the large wooden vats, and gathered fresh water from the nearby stream. Every task was performed slowly and carefully, just as it had been for many years. Animal hides arrived from local farmers after the harvest season or from village butchers. William examined each hide closely, making sure it was suitable for turning into strong, durable leather that could serve families for many years. The work required patience rather than speed. The hides were carefully cleaned, soaked, and prepared through several gentle stages. Over many days, and sometimes weeks, natural tannins taken from the bark of oak and hemlock trees slowly transformed the hides into sturdy leather. Large wooden vats stood quietly inside the workshop, each holding a different stage of the process. William checked them every day, knowing that careful attention would produce smooth, lasting leather. As time passed, the finished leather was removed, washed with clean water, and hung beneath open shelters where fresh air gently dried it. Once dry, William rubbed the leather with natural oils, making it soft, flexible, and ready for skilled craftsmen. Nearby shoemakers used the leather to create sturdy boots and comfortable shoes. Harness makers fashioned strong reins for horses, while saddlers crafted dependable saddles for long journeys. Other artisans used it to make belts, pouches, book covers, and protective work gloves. Young apprentices often visited the tannery to learn the value of patience and careful workmanship. William reminded them that good leather could not be rushed.
every stage required time, attention, and respect for the materials provided by nature. Throughout every season, the tannery quietly supported the village. Though its work often happened behind the scenes, nearly every family relied on the products created from its carefully prepared leather. As the sun slowly disappeared beyond the hills, William finished cleaning the wooden vats, stored his tools in their proper places, and closed the workshop for the evening. The gentle sound of the nearby stream continued through the growing darkness, while another day's careful work became part of the village's peaceful rhythm.
Tonight, our peaceful journey through colonial America continues inside a small village shoemaker's workshop, where every pair of shoes was carefully crafted by hand, with patience and quiet skill. Near the center of the village stood a cozy wooden shop with a simple sign hanging above the door. Inside worked a gentle shoemaker named Nathaniel, whose sturdy footwear helped farmers, teachers, blacksmiths, and children walk safely through every season. Before the morning sun warmed the village streets, Nathaniel unlocked his workshop and prepared for another peaceful day. He lit a small lantern, arranged his tools upon a sturdy workbench, and examined the leather that had recently arrived from the local tannery. His tools were simple but dependable. Sharp knives, wooden shoe lasts, awls, waxed linen thread, small hammers, and polished needles rested neatly beside carefully cut pieces of leather. Every tool had been used for many years and was kept in excellent condition. Nathaniel began by measuring each customer's feet with great care. He believed that comfortable shoes could only be made through accurate measurements and patient craftsmanship. Every foot was slightly different, so every pair was made especially for the person who would wear it. Using sturdy leather, he carefully traced each pattern before cutting every piece by hand. Small holes were made with an awl, allowing strong waxed thread to stitch the leather together with firm, even seams. The soles were cut from thick leather that could withstand muddy roads, rocky paths, and snowy winters. Tiny wooden pegs and careful stitching held each shoe together, creating footwear that often lasted for many years with proper care. Throughout the day, villagers quietly entered the workshop. Farmers ordered heavy work boots for long days in the fields. Children received sturdy shoes for walking to the one-room schoolhouse. Travelers requested durable boots for journeys between distant towns, while mothers brought worn shoes to be repaired instead of replaced. Young apprentices often watched Nathaniel work with steady concentration. He patiently showed them how to sharpen a knife safely, stitch smooth seams, and polish finished leather until it shone softly in the afternoon light. He reminded them that a good shoemaker earned trust by building shoes that protected every step. The workshop was filled with the gentle scent of leather, beeswax, and fresh wood. Outside, birds sang among the nearby trees, while the quiet sounds of village life continued at an unhurried pace.
As evening approached, Nathaniel inspected the final pair of shoes, carefully polished them with a soft cloth, and placed them neatly upon a wooden shelf, ready for their new owner. He cleaned every tool, swept the workshop floor, and closed the door as the golden light faded across the peaceful village. The finished shoes would soon carry families through fields, forests, village streets, and countless ordinary days, serving faithfully one careful step at a time.
Tonight, our gentle journey through colonial America continues inside the warm glow of a humble candlemaker's workshop, where light itself was carefully crafted by hand. At the edge of a quiet village stood a small wooden building with shelves lined from floor to ceiling with finished candles of every size. Here worked a kind and patient candlemaker named Abigail, whose candles brought comfort to homes long after the sun had disappeared below the horizon. Before dawn painted the sky with soft shades of blue, Abigail quietly unlocked her workshop and prepared for another peaceful day. She lit the small fire beneath a large iron kettle, where clean beeswax and carefully rendered tallow slowly began to melt. The workshop soon filled with the comforting scent of warm wax and honey. Nearby rested neatly bundled cotton wicks, polished wooden molds, smooth dipping rods, and sturdy cooling racks. Every tool had its place, and each one helped transform simple materials into steady sources of light. Abigail carefully examined every wick before beginning her work. She believed that a strong candle always began with a properly prepared wick. If the wick was too thin, the flame would burn weakly. If it was too thick, the candle would melt too quickly. For many candles, she used the traditional dipping method. She tied dozens of cotton wicks to long wooden rods and slowly lowered them into the warm wax. After lifting them out, she allowed each thin layer to cool before dipping them again. Patiently repeating this process.
Some families requested molded candles instead. Abigail gently placed prepared wicks inside wooden molds before carefully pouring the warm wax into each one. Once cooled, the finished candles slipped smoothly from their molds with clean, even shapes. Every candle was carefully trimmed, polished, and inspected before being placed upon the wooden shelves. Abigail never hurried her work. She believed that every family deserved candles that would burn safely and steadily through long winter evenings. Throughout the day, villagers quietly visited the workshop. Mothers purchased candles for preparing evening meals. School teachers needed them for reading lessons during dark mornings. Tailors and seamstresses relied on candlelight while repairing clothing after sunset. Travelers packed extra candles before setting out on long journeys between distant villages. Children often stood quietly watching as the warm wax slowly dripped from the dipping rods. Abigail smiled gently as she explained how patience created stronger candles. She reminded them that even a small light could brighten an entire room. As autumn and winter approached, demand for candles steadily increased. The shorter days meant that every household depended upon reliable candlelight for cooking, reading, writing letters, mending tools, and sharing peaceful conversations together. Late in the afternoon, Abigail carefully wrapped finished bundles of candles with soft twine before placing them into sturdy wooden boxes.
Each bundle represented many hours of careful work and would soon brighten another family's home. As evening settled over the quiet village, she extinguished the fire beneath the kettle, cleaned every mold and tool, swept the wooden floor, and softly closed the workshop door. Across the village, tiny candle flames slowly appeared inside windows, filling the peaceful streets with a warm and welcoming glow. Those humble handmade candles asked for nothing more than a careful hand and a quiet flame. Yet they faithfully brought comfort, safety, and gentle light to countless ordinary evenings throughout colonial America.
Tonight, our peaceful journey through colonial America continues inside a quiet pottery workshop where ordinary earth was patiently transformed into beautiful and useful treasures. At the edge of a peaceful village stood a modest brick workshop beside a gentle stream. Here worked a thoughtful potter named Benjamin, whose strong hands shaped simple clay into bowls, plates, jugs, and cooking pots used by nearly every family in the community. Before the first rays of sunlight reached the rooftops, Benjamin quietly opened the wooden doors of his workshop. He greeted the cool morning air, checked the large stone kiln, and carefully inspected several pieces that had cooled overnight. The workshop was calm and orderly. A sturdy wooden potter's wheel stood near the center of the room, while shelves displayed rows of drying pottery. Nearby rested wooden shaping tools, smooth sponges, wire cutters, clay knives, and buckets filled with clean water. Every tool was simple, dependable, and well cared for.
Benjamin began his day by preparing fresh clay. He patiently kneaded and folded it again and again, removing tiny air pockets that could cause a pot to crack during firing. He believed that careful preparation was just as important as skillful shaping. Once the clay was ready, he placed a smooth ball of it upon the spinning wheel.
As the wheel slowly turned beneath his steady foot, his wet hands gently guided the clay upward. With quiet concentration, a simple lump of earth gradually became a graceful bowl with smooth, even walls. Each piece required careful attention. A cooking pot needed thick walls to withstand years of daily use. Water jugs required sturdy handles that could support their weight. Mixing bowls were shaped wide enough for preparing bread dough, while small cups were made comfortable to hold in the hand. After shaping, every piece rested on wooden shelves to dry slowly over several days. Rushing this process could cause cracks, so Benjamin allowed time to do its quiet work. When the pottery had dried enough, he carefully carved simple decorative lines around the edges using a small wooden tool. His decorations were modest but elegant, reflecting the quiet beauty of everyday life in the village. Once enough pieces were ready, Benjamin carefully stacked them inside the large brick kiln. He arranged every bowl, jug, and plate with great care, leaving just enough space for the hot air to circulate evenly during the long firing process.
The kiln burned day and night, fueled with dry oak and maple wood. Benjamin watched the fire patiently, adding wood little by little to keep the temperature steady. He knew that a patient fire created stronger pottery. Throughout the day, villagers quietly visited the workshop. Farmers purchased sturdy crocks for storing grain and salted meat. Bakers ordered large mixing bowls. Families brought cracked jugs, hoping they might still be repaired. Children admired the rows of freshly made cups waiting to be fired. Young apprentices often stood beside Benjamin, carefully observing every movement of his hands. He reminded them that good pottery could not be hurried. Every successful piece was built with patience, balance, and steady practice. As the afternoon sunlight streamed through the workshop windows, the shelves filled with newly shaped pottery, waiting for its turn inside the kiln. The room carried the pleasant scent of damp clay, fresh wood, and the gentle warmth of the glowing fire. As evening approached, Benjamin inspected the cooling kiln one final time before cleaning his wheel and washing every tool. He swept the clay from the wooden floor, closed the workshop doors, and watched the golden light fade across the peaceful village. Long after he had gone home, the warm kiln continued its quiet work. Inside, simple clay slowly transformed into lasting pottery that would serve families for many years, carrying water, preparing meals, and preserving the ordinary comforts of colonial life. Where the steady rhythm of great wooden wheels transformed simple grain into the fine flour that filled every family's breadbasket. At the edge of the village stood a sturdy water mill built beside a gently flowing river. There worked a kind and dependable miller named Thomas, whose careful hands helped provide one of the community's most important daily necessities. Long before sunrise painted the eastern sky with soft shades of gold, Thomas quietly unlocked the heavy wooden doors of the mill. The cool morning breeze carried the soothing sound of flowing water as the great water wheel slowly began its endless turning. Inside the mill, everything moved with calm purpose. Thick oak beams supported the building, while enormous stone grinding wheels rested at its center. Wooden chutes guided grain from large storage bins, and neatly stacked sacks waited patiently along the walls. Thomas began each morning by inspecting the grinding stones. He brushed away every trace of yesterday's flour and carefully checked that the stones remained perfectly balanced. Even the smallest uneven surface could produce poor flour, and he took pride in maintaining every part of the mill.
Soon, the first farmers arrived with wagons filled with freshly harvested wheat, rye, barley, and corn. Each family patiently waited for their turn while greeting neighbors with friendly conversation. Thomas carefully poured the grain into a wooden hopper positioned above the grinding stones. As water flowed beneath the mill, it turned the giant wheel outside, which slowly powered the massive stones inside. With a quiet rumbling sound, the upper millstone began to rotate. Grain slipped gently between the smooth surfaces where it was steadily crushed into soft, fine flour.
The fresh aroma filled the entire building, creating a warm and comfortable atmosphere. Thomas adjusted the distance between the stones with great care. If they were too close, the flour could become scorched from friction. Too far apart, and the grain would remain coarse. Years of experience taught him exactly how to find the perfect balance. Freshly ground flour flowed through wooden channels into clean cloth sacks below. Thomas tied each sack securely before carefully marking the owner's name, so every family received exactly what they had brought.
Some villagers preferred fine white flour for special celebrations, while others requested coarser meal for everyday bread, hearty porridge, or corn cakes. Thomas patiently prepared each order according to their wishes. Children often watched with wide eyes as the giant wooden gears slowly turned overhead. Thomas smiled warmly and explained how the flowing river provided all the power needed to grind hundreds of pounds of grain without a single horse or ox. During quiet moments, he carefully oiled the wooden gears, tightened iron fittings, and swept away every bit of loose flour. Keeping the mill clean reduced the risk of dust fires and ensured that every batch remained fresh and pure. As afternoon sunlight streamed through the narrow windows, the mill remained alive with the gentle sounds of creaking timber, flowing water, and softly grinding stone. Outside, birds sang beside the river, while the great water wheel turned without hurry. By evening, the final sacks of flour had been loaded onto waiting wagons. Families thanked Thomas before beginning the peaceful journey home, knowing that warm bread would soon fill their kitchens. Before leaving for the night, Thomas carefully closed the grain bins, checked the water gate, and listened one last time to the quiet river flowing beneath the mill. The great stones gradually came to rest, and silence gently settled over the building. Though the mill stood still until morning, its day's work would nourish the entire village. From every loaf of bread to every simple biscuit baked over the hearth, the quiet labor of the village miller helped sustain the peaceful rhythm of colonial life.
Tonight, our peaceful journey through colonial America continues in a quiet weaving workshop where slender branches gathered from the riverbanks were patiently transformed into sturdy baskets used in nearly every home and farm. Not far from the village stream stood a small wooden cottage shaded by tall willow trees. Here worked a gentle basket weaver named Abigail, whose skilled hands created baskets for gathering apples, carrying vegetables, storing bread, collecting eggs, and transporting firewood. Before the morning mist had lifted from the fields, Abigail stepped outside with a small hand knife and a woven bundle. She walked quietly along the riverbank, selecting long, flexible willow shoots that had grown strong through the spring rains. Each branch was chosen with care. Young willow bent easily without breaking, making it perfect for weaving. Abigail trimmed every shoot to the proper length and tied them into neat bundles before carrying them back to her workshop. Inside, the room was simple but peaceful. Wooden pegs lined one wall, holding bundles of willow sorted by size and thickness. A sturdy workbench stood beneath the window, where sunlight gently illuminated her careful work. Nearby rested a small bucket of water, pruning knives, smooth bone tools, and wooden molds used to shape baskets of many sizes. Before weaving, Abigail soaked the willow branches in cool water until they became soft and flexible. She believed that patient preparation allowed the branches to bend gracefully without splitting. She began each basket by crossing several thick willow rods to form a strong foundation. One by one, thinner branches were woven around the base in an even pattern, slowly creating a firm circle that would support everything the basket carried. As the sides rose higher, Abigail gently bent the upright rods into smooth curves. Her hands moved with calm confidence, weaving each strand over one rod and under the next with a quiet rhythm that never seemed rushed. Every basket served a different purpose. Deep baskets carried freshly harvested potatoes and carrots.
Wide, shallow baskets protected delicate berries. Tall baskets stored wool waiting to be spun into yarn. Smaller baskets safely held sewing supplies, herbs, or eggs gathered each morning.
Once the weaving was complete, Abigail carefully trimmed every loose end with a sharp knife. She folded the remaining willow neatly into the rim, creating a smooth edge that strengthened the basket while making it comfortable to carry. Strong handles were woven separately before being firmly attached. Abigail gently tested each handle by lifting heavy stones, making certain it could withstand years of daily use without loosening. Throughout the day, villagers quietly visited her workshop. Farmers ordered large harvest baskets before autumn arrived. Mothers selected smaller baskets for their kitchens. Shopkeepers purchased sturdy display baskets for bread, vegetables, and cloth. Children often watched with quiet fascination as a pile of simple branches slowly became a beautiful basket beneath Abigail's patient hands. She smiled kindly and reminded them that every careful weave added strength to the whole. During peaceful afternoons, she sometimes worked beneath the shade of the willow trees outside her cottage. The gentle breeze rustled the leaves above, while birds sang softly along the nearby stream, making every moment feel calm and unhurried. As evening approached, rows of finished baskets filled the workshop shelves. Their natural golden color glowed warmly in the fading sunlight,
Each one ready to become part of a family's daily life. Before returning home, Abigail swept the floor, covered the remaining willow branches with damp cloths to keep them flexible, and carefully stored every tool in its proper place. Long after the workshop doors were closed, her baskets quietly awaited their new homes. They would carry harvests from the fields, fresh bread from the ovens, laundry to the river, and countless simple treasures, serving the people of the village through many peaceful seasons. Tonight, our peaceful journey through colonial America continues inside the quiet workshop of a village basket weaver, where slender branches gathered from nearby rivers became strong and beautiful baskets used in every corner of daily life. Near the edge of the village, beside a peaceful stream lined with graceful willow trees, stood a small wooden cottage with an open shed facing the morning sun. Here lived a gentle basket weaver named Abigail, whose patient hands transformed flexible willow, ash, and oak splints into sturdy baskets that served nearly every family in the community. Long before the village awakened, Abigail stepped quietly into the cool morning air, carrying a woven gathering basket of her own making. The soft mist drifted across the river as birds welcomed the new day with gentle songs. She carefully selected young willow shoots, choosing only those that were long, straight, and healthy. Each branch was cut with care, leaving the tree able to grow new shoots the following spring. The peaceful rhythm of harvesting reminded her that nature always rewarded patience and respect. Returning home, Abigail soaked the willow rods in large wooden tubs filled with cool water. This simple process softened the branches, allowing them to bend without breaking during weaving.